which really impact mostly people of color. So I will share some wonderful news on that later on in my presentation, but first I just wanted to give everyone some basic information about how you can protect yourself on the streets, in the vehicle, in your home, from unwarranted searches and questioning by the police. And then of course we'll take questions at the end. So, what to do when stopped by the police? And in New York City, we are lucky enough to have an executive order, a policy that was passed by Mayor Bloomberg a number of years ago that says that in general, the New York Police Department, so any NYPD officer, is not allowed to ask anyone that they stop on the street about their immigration status. This is much different. If you're ever traveling in upstate New York, you will see local police officers asking you that all the time, and that's a problem, and I'm happy to talk to anybody after the panel about those situations, but I'm going to be focusing just on New York City for now. So if you are just walking around in the city and you are stopped by a police officer, the first and most important thing that you all need to remember is that you have the right to remain silent. You do not want to do the job of the police officer, right? And you are doing the job of the police officer if you just offer over to them your immigration status, how you came to the country, when you came to the country, if you've been previously deported, if you have family who's been deported. You don't want to offer over any of that information to the police officer. The best thing to do is to remain silent. Now, they may ask you for your name and for some identification. In the state of New York, it is not required that you give your name when a police officer asks that. Under the law, you do not have to give that information. However, we usually advise individuals do provide their name if you don't have a problem with doing that, because not providing your name often will lead to increased suspicion and will just cause more of a problem with the police officer. And if you just want to quickly get out of the situation, it might just be best to share your name, where you're going, what you're doing, and be on your way. You might not get that lucky, and if the questioning really goes beyond what is your name and where are you going and what are you doing, you may want to stop answering those questions. At any point, even if you answer some questions of the law enforcement agent, the NYPD officer, you can stop answering questions at any point. And the other most important thing, aside from remaining silent, if you are going to say anything beyond your name, you want to say, I would like to speak with my attorney before I answer any further questions. At that point, law enforcement officers should stop asking you questions. Now, they don't always do that, and they may continue to ask questions, and you may continue to say, I refuse to answer any further questions until I've had a chance to consult my attorney. This is the best thing for you to do. If they start asking questions about your status, you can say, I choose not to answer any further questions until I have spoken with my attorney. If you are undocumented and you do not have any identification, you never, ever, ever want to give over false identification. I know in order to live and survive in the country, when you are undocumented, sometimes we get false documents. You don't ever want to show a false document to a police officer. This in itself is another criminal infraction you can be charged with. You also don't want to lie about your status, so this is why I say it's better to just remain silent. If you're caught in a lie, this can also jeopardize your rights. Of course, you don't ever in a situation when the police officer want to turn and run away. I think everyone probably knows that, but that will just also create more suspicion. So keep your cool, answer the questions as far as you're comfortable answering those questions, and again, you can always stop answering those questions and remain silent and ask to speak with an attorney first. Now, if that happens, if you say, I'm not going to answer any further questions and I would like to speak with my attorney, for the majority of times, you probably will be taken in and you will be detained, you will be arrested. The thing is, though, is that you haven't given that police officer any information to convict you, right? You haven't given them the evidence necessarily that they need to charge you and hold you for a specific crime. So the less you say, the better situation you're in. You're not incriminating yourself. And if anyone is familiar with the Fifth Amendment gives us the right to remain silent and to protect ourselves from incriminating ourselves. And so use that right. We all have that right, regardless of your immigration status. Everybody that has their feet on American soil are protected by certain fundamental rights within our Constitution, including the Fifth Amendment. If you are on the street and a police officer continues to hammer away with questions at you and you've already said, I don't want to answer any further questions, I would like to speak with my attorney, here's how you'll figure out whether or not you're going to actually be detained and taken into the police department or if you're free to go. You can just simply ask the police officer, I don't want to answer any further questions, am I free to go? Ask them that simple question, am I free to go? If they don't have any evidence that gives them the requisite amount of suspicion that you have committed a crime or are committing a crime or about to commit a crime, they must let you go. So at that point, if they say no, you are not free to go, that means that they have some level of suspicion in their minds that justifies them in detaining you, in their mind. Legally, that may not be the same case, but that'll be sorted out once you get to the police department, the precinct. If you are in that interaction with a police officer and then they want to search you, so we all talk about stop and frisk. The police can stop you and question you, but a frisk is something more. That's when a police officer pats you down, and the idea of a pat down or a frisk is to check you for weapons. This is solely for the police officer's safety. But the way it's used in New York City is that everyone who's stopped is basically also frisked. But beyond a frisk, you can also be searched. And if the police officer does begin to search you, that means they go into your pockets, they go in around the waistband of your pants, or go something more invasive than just patting your clothing, over your clothing. That would be considered a search. And you should always say, no matter what situation, no matter what you think you may have done or haven't done, you always want to say, if that happens, I do not consent to this search. It is very important, because if you are being searched illegally and you do later choose to file claim against the NYPD and that particular officer for this illegal search, you will have had to have said, I do not consent to the search. One of the exceptions to your protections against an unlawful search and seizure is that you consented. And if you don't say, I do not consent to this search, the police officer may take your silence as consent. That's why it is so important to say, I do not consent to this search. Okay, so that's on the street. What about if you're at your home? Okay, I'm going to speed it up. So if you're at your home and a police officer, an NYPD officer comes to your home, or even an immigration officer, the best thing to do is they'll knock on the door and they'll say, hey, police or immigration. What you should do is you should answer the door, go a step outside, and close the door behind you. You don't want to give the police officer any indication that you are giving consent for him or her to enter your home. You should check the warrant, ask to see a copy of the warrant, or see the warrant that that police officer has. It should have the name of the person. If it's an arrest warrant, it'll have the name of the individual they're looking for. It'll have the address for the home where they're supposed to be, and it'll be signed by a judge. If it doesn't have any of these three things, or any of that information is incorrect, the warrant is invalid. Okay, and that means that they cannot, if they say, I want to arrest, Joe here at this address, and the address is incorrect, the police officer is at a different address than what is listed on the warrant, that warrant is not valid, okay, and they cannot execute that warrant at that time, at that location. However, if the warrant is for you and all the information is correct, you should cooperate. Again, step outside so as to not jeopardize anybody else that's living in your home that may be undocumented or may be subject to questioning by the police. So you step outside and cooperate. When you get to the precinct, of course, ask for an attorney. You always want to ask for an attorney. In criminal proceedings in the United States, of course, we have a right to counsel. Everyone has a right to request an attorney and have an attorney represent them. In immigration proceedings, it's a little different. Perhaps Elisa will talk about this a little bit later. You do have a right to an attorney, but not a free attorney. So in any case, you always want to ask to speak to an attorney. In the vehicle, I know we have some livery cab drivers in the audience today, so I will just briefly go over what happens if you're stopped in the vehicle. The one exception to showing your ID if you're stopped in a vehicle is, in the state of New York, is that if you are stopped in a vehicle, you do have to show your driver's license if you're asked for it. And this is obviously just to ascertain whether or not you're able to actually drive that vehicle. So there's a legitimate purpose for asking for that in that scenario. So you should provide that. If you don't have a driver's license and you're driving without a license, do not, again, show any fake documents or a fake driver's license. This will get you into more trouble. It's better to not show anything at all. And again, remain silent. You don't want to say, oh, I don't have a driver's license or on anything else. Remain silent. Ask to speak to your attorney. I think I'll end it there. I'm sure there'll be more questions.